What?
Did you lose power?
No,
Huh. Must have been a couple of us
Yep.
that normally lose it that didn't this one time.
I think up to the corner of 4th Street, we had it.
This meeting of the Middletown City Historic Commission is now called to order. All right, let us begin with a roll call.
Roger Daniel,
Here,
Levi Kramer, Jamie Lucanis,
Here.
Matt Dixon,
Here.
Jim Stabler,
Here.
Andy Brickler,
Here.
Sam Cornwall. You have quorum.
All right. Let's begin with the swearing in of witnesses.
If you're going to speak.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear that any testimony that you give before the commission today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I'm sorry, that should have been swear or affirm. So. All right, approval of the minutes of March 17th, 2022. I know we had discussed some changes to those meeting minutes, but unfortunately I never had time to go back through and reduce them to something that I could send to you. I don't know if anybody else did.
I made the changes that Levi Kramer requested.
All right. Then, do we have a motion with respect to the minutes of March 17th?
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The minutes of March 17th, 2022 are approved. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for April 21st, 2022. So everybody had an opportunity to receive and review those minutes.
yes.
Does anybody have any changes or additions that they feel are necessary to those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the minutes for April 21st, 2022, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Minutes of April 21st, 2022, meeting of the Middletown Historic Commission have been approved. The first item on our agenda is a certificate of appropriateness for the Highlands Historic District, being 2700 McGee Avenue for a fence. Do we have a staff report?
We do. So the requested action is an issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of a 4-foot tall black metal fence. The property history for 2700 McGee is the property is a 2-story single-family residential dwelling built in 1926. The property is zoned R2 low-density residential and is located in the Highlands Historic District. The proposal of the work is the applicant is proposing installation of a 4-foot tall black metal fence. All illustrations were provided by the applicant. As you see in the top right is the 3-rail with rings, which is what the applicant is going to install. And the bottom 2 pictures is similar to what the fence will look like installed. Here's 2700 McGee Avenue from the aerial view. The picture on your bottom right is what was provided on the fence quote. It shows that the fence will be built abutting from the property. Here we go. So straight out from the house to the side, basically to the public right of way, down, and then across. Does not go fully across the backyard, but partially, as seen in the image. So no person owning, renting, or occupying a property that's historically designated can carry out any exterior alteration, restoration, reconstruction, demolition, new construction, or moving of historic landmark or property without first obtaining a certificate of appropriateness. Other approvals and permits required would be a certificate of zoning compliance. This fence would be in compliance with the development code other than needing the COA. That concludes my staff report.
Is the applicant present?
The applicant is.
Would the applicant care to speak to the application?
Do you have any questions?
Does anybody have questions for the applicant?
It's just going down from, like you said, the side of the house, all the way along the sidewalk, and then up to, there's a privacy fence between us, and I call it the castle behind us. We'll just go tie into that privacy fence, because we like to keep the privacy fence.
So it's not
We have a
fence.
pool, and we have a chicken wire fence right now, so it's a huge improvement from the chicken wire.
All right. I'll open,
Doing it, so we're doing a good job.
we'll open the public forum. Is there any member of the public present that wishes to speak in favor of the application? There being no one wishing to speak in favor of the application, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak against the application? There being no one that wishes to speak against the application, we will close the public forum. Discussion amongst the commission members?
I think it looks fine.
Good to me.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second.
All right. We can have a roll call of the vote.
Sam Cornwall. Andy Brickler.
Yes.
Jim Stabler.
Yes.
Matt Dixon.
Yes.
Jamie Lukinas.
Yes.
Levi Kramer. I don't know, I said that. And Roger Daniel.
Yes.
All right. The certificate of appropriateness is approved as submitted. Thank you.
Is the
You
pool
are, of
open?
course, welcome to remain if you wish to see the rest of the meeting, but you're free to go otherwise.
Thanks for coming in.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a certificate of appropriateness, Central Historic District, 34 South Main Street for demolition of building. Before the staff report, I would like to state that we have not considered the demolition of a historic district building since the Rose Furniture Building in 2013, to the best of my recollection, if anybody thinks that is incorrect. Okay. Since that time, the ordinances have been changed, and I know even if they had not been, we would not be fresh on it. So I was hoping that we could possibly get the ordinance 12-1207 and read out so that we're all fresh and on it. All right, 12-1207, demolition or moving of historic buildings and structures. Subsection A, the demolition of a historic landmark designated by the Historic Commission shall not be permitted unless one of the following conditions exist. 1, demolition has been ordered by the Development Code Administrator or Chief Building Inspector for public safety because of an unsafe or dangerous condition that constitutes an emergency. 2, the owner demonstrates that the historic landmark is either not habitable or otherwise not safe. The repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of the property is not economically feasible, and the property's condition did not result from damage which has been purposefully caused to the property or allowed to occur due to the gross neglect of the owner with the intention of making the restoration of the property not economically feasible. For purposes of this section, economically feasible means that the cost of the repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of an historic landmark, when combined with the cost of the land, do not exceed the fair market value of the real property after the repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of the historic landmark has been completed. No permit to demolish will be permitted under this division, A2 or A3 hereof, unless the owner or owner's representative obtains final approval from the Historic Commission for the structure which will replace the structure to be demolished. 3, the owner demonstrates to the satisfaction of the Historic Commission that the denial of the demolition is inconsistent with a legitimate interest in the health, safety, and welfare of the city. Or 4, the demolition request is for an inappropriate addition or a portion of a structure that is not historically significant, and the demolition will not adversely affect those parts of the structure that are significant as determined by the Historic Commission. B, whoever constructs, reconstructs, or alters any exterior architectural feature within the historic district without a certificate of appropriateness shall be required to restore and reconstruct such features in full detail. C, no historic landmark may be moved from its current location unless the Historic Commission determines that the moving of the property will not materially and adversely impact the historical character of the building or structure or other historic landmarks in proximity to the subject historic landmark. D, appeal for denied demolition and alteration. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I think stop at that point because we can worry about an appeal of a denied demolition or alteration if we reach that point. Does anybody want to go on and read through what we'd be considering at that point, or is that enough for today?
That's enough for me.
That's enough for today. Gives us what we need.
All right. Do we have a staff report?
We do. So for the property history, according to the South Main Historic District nomination, the U.S. Hotel building was constructed in 1831 and is the oldest hotel in Middletown. The building features a Victorian Italianate architectural style and constructed of brick. The building is 3 stories in height with a 5 by east front elevation. This building contributes to the historical and architectural significance of the Main Street Commercial Historic District. The applicant is proposing demolition of the building. Here's the location of the building from the aerial view. If you notice, the building just to the south by southwest is just has the facade remaining. This portion of the building here is what is removed, and this right here is the wall that you will see later on in the PowerPoint that is supposedly the weak wall. So some of the documents that were provided came from CES. This is the engineering firm that they used to determine that the building either had one of 2 options: either demolish the building or reconstruct the west exterior brick and foundation wall. That's the highlighted portion on the bottom right-hand side. That was the west side that I showed you just a few seconds ago, which is where the Rose Building was demolished. Additionally, here is Schedule A. This is the high-level scope of work and reasoning for the request. This was also provided to you guys in the previous staff packet. Essentially, what the applicant is wanting to do is demolish the building completely. Does not want to leave the facade. It believes the facade would leave a liability, but would give you the opportunity to take, for the Historic Commission or the Historical Society, to come in and take whatever they would feel necessary or whatever they would like. So as Matt, you previously mentioned, no person owning, renting, or occupying a property that's historically designated can carry out any exterior alteration, restoration, reconstruction, demolition, new construction, or moving of historic landmark or property without first obtaining a certificate of appropriateness. Another approval or permit required would be a demolition permit from the building department. That ends my staff report.
All right. Well, there is actually, again, in the statute, a specific appeals process for a denial of a certificate of appropriateness for a demolition of a building, which is not that which is up there on the screen. So just want to make sure that we have that. There is the intermediate appeal for the proposed demolition on the grounds of hardship before the Historic Commission, before it would go to the Planning Commission.
So you're saying there's one more, they could appeal your decision back to you for hardship and then it'd go to the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, the decision we make today is not a final decision. It's a 2-step process for demolition of a building, not a 1-step process.
Could we even approve this if we wanted to? I'm just reading this last sentence of A2.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what the burden of persuasion is on the applicant. Well, I think that we will go through each step systematically and address each one by discussion by the commission before we reach a decision. Okay, if that concludes the staff report, is the applicant present to speak to the application?
No, he is not.
At this point, we'll open a public forum. Is there anyone present that wishes to speak in favor of the application? There being no one who has requested to speak in favor of the application, is there anyone present that wishes to speak against the application? There being no one that has requested to speak against the application, we will now close the public forum. All right, normally we just skip over the part where we make a decision as to whether the structure or site is historically significant. I think for purposes of completeness with this application that we should go through that. We are supposed to determine whether the structure or site is significant based upon its value as a reminder of the cultural, historical, or archaeological heritage of the city, state, or nation, its location as a site of significant local, state, or national events, identification of a person or persons who significantly contributed to the development of the city, state, or nation, D, identification as the work of a master builder, designer, or architect whose individual work has influenced the city, state, or nation. E, value as a building that is recognized for the quality of its architecture, that retains sufficient elements showing such architectural significance. F, example of an architectural style or period. And or G, character as a contributing element in the applicable historic district. It makes most sense to go through them in order, but I think we can basically establish that we do have G because it was one of the significant buildings that was a contributing element in the application for the historic district. I don't think that anybody has any dispute regarding that.
No.
All right. Do we consider that it does have value as a reminder of the cultural, historical, or architectural heritage of the city? It is the oldest hotel in Middletown. It is, I understand, the oldest building in downtown Middletown. It is the oldest commercial building in the city of any kind. I mean, I think all of those are factors.
Jim, can you add anything to that?
No, it is. It's the second oldest building that I know of in existence. The oldest being the Vandermeer House on Thornhill Lane. That's a couple years older. So yes, it is, as Matthew said, the oldest commercial building in Middletown.
Okay. So I think we can say that A is established, location and site of significant local, state, or national events. Let's see. Well, given that it's a hotel, and it was basically the premier hotel until the Manchester was built, I'd assume that there was such a thing, but I can't think of any particular.
Wasn't that where Verity borned Armco? I thought that was a piece
He
of that.
born Armco at the Harlan's house on the between Broad and Vandermeer in the back. That's where they signed it on the table that we have now at the Historical Society.
Okay.
Okay. I am not sure that that is the case. It is likely simply based upon how long that it's been present in the city, nearly 200 years, and its site as a hotel, and again, one of the premier restaurants and bars of the.
That's where Paul Sorg met his wife. She worked there.
Okay, so that is something. But if there's one such thing, there's likely to be others.
There's a bunch of people that stayed there too. We've got a list somewhere.
The identification with persons or persons who significantly contributed to the development of the city, state, or nation. And that's obviously Paul Sorg. He made significant, he purchased it, made significant improvements to it. It was one of the cluster of buildings that he owned downtown that was the center of his basic commercial empire. Obviously, it's not as significant as the Opera House or the Sorg House or the Baptist Church that we no longer have, but it's certainly up there with the things that are identified with Paul Sorg, who is one of the leading historical figures in Middletown. I don't know if there's any other person, but it does seem at least the association with Mr. Sorg is sufficient to meet that criteria. D, identification of work of master builder, designer, or architect. And I think it's a bit of a mishmash of changes that have been made over various decades, and it's been added on to, altered, or remodeled on multiple occasions, and I'm not sure any of the people that did it were significant.
I think the building as we know it now with the facade and everything in the front, that was put in like 1850s, 1855. Then it was added onto, I think, in the back a couple different times.
We don't think that Hannaford or any of the other big architects are.
I honestly don't know. I don't think they were around then.
Value of the building that is recognized as the quality of its architecture and retains sufficient evidence showing such architectural significance. It is largely in the state. I believe that it was in the 1850s with some alteration.
Yeah.
But
I think it was like 1855 or something.
in evidence, that it is one of the graphically depicted buildings early in the historic preservation plan for the city. So I think that that is indication that it is considered to have architectural significance. Example of an architectural style or period, it is, no, I'll find the description of it somewhere.
I think it would be on your inventory sheet.
Yeah. Victorian Italianate style with step gable roof over original building. Are there many such buildings in that style or from that period in the city?
I mean, we have a lot of Victorian buildings.
How many have Italianate elements? That's true.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, Rose Furniture, I realize we only have the facade, but isn't that Italianate?
Yeah.
Yes, we have very few commercial Italianate buildings.
And that's a
left.
secondary issue because the feasibility of the facade being preserved was because there were 3-story tall brick structures on either side of it. Fundamentally, permitting the demolition of the U.S. Hotel essentially means that the facade is gone because we determined that it was feasible because there were 3-story tall brick constructed buildings on either side of it, and there will not be if we approve this demolition. So we are effectively approving the demolition of the Rose Furniture Building facade if we approve the demolition of this building, because I don't think that there is any, we would have any basis to deny an application for that demolition if we approve this.
Does the city own the Rose Furniture?
No, I think it's still in the hands of,
It's gonna be part of that Hollywood thing, I know, but I don't know whether they actually got title to it or an option for it or what the story was.
Historic Rose Furniture LLC.
I think that's either Steve Kuhn or Mike Robinette. I feel like it's still Mike Robinette, maybe.
And we already hit G. All right, so is there anybody that, having reviewed the criteria and discussed them, believes that the structure is not significant? All right, so we'll proceed on the basis that we are considering the demolition of a historically significant structure in the historic district. Okay, so there are 4 bases that we can use to approve it on the initial application. The first is that the demolition has been ordered by the Development Code Administrator or Chief Building Inspector for public safety because of an unsafe or dangerous condition that constitutes an emergency. Staff, and to your knowledge, has that been ordered?
No.
All right, so we will not be able to approve the application for demolition on that basis. 2, the owner demonstrates that the historic building is either not habitable or otherwise not safe, or that would be the first point. We've seen the evidence that's been presented. Does anybody have any discussion on that point? Does the commission feel that it is not habitable or unsafe based upon the evidence that's been presented by the applicant?
I mean, just a couple things on it that I noticed is that that report is from 2019, and the building is still standing, so that's almost 2 years since that report was done. So I think that's just something to think about.
Well, there was also the widely reported fire in the building that was supposed to have caused damage in the structure in 2020, which is after that was.
Yep.
I'm not thinking that that improved the situation a great deal. But
One thing I want to throw out, I don't know where it's appropriate, but when they tore down the Rose Furniture Building, we or somebody, I remember this happening, and you probably do too, Matthew, told them that wall now that is exposed, that wasn't exposed before, is not weatherproof, or it could be damaged by weather, and it needed to be treated. And the applicant, or the owner then, knew that.
But wasn't that supposed to be part of the demolition that they would?
I don't know. I was trying to think whether the city was responsible for it. Did they do it?
The repair on the north wall?
South wall.
That the demolition of the Rose Furniture Building was supposed to have been conducted in a manner that would not cause damage or
Yeah,
deterioration.
but they found out that, I don't know, the brick was different or what, because when they built it, although it was, I don't know which, it would have been built first, so it should have been the better brick, but they said that there would be damage, weather damage, since they removed the wall. I don't know. I don't know if they could be used against us or.
I heard that there was damage to the apartment on the other side of the Rose Furniture Building because of water, and they had to do a lot of remediation on it. As a matter of fact, Coons and Mike, I think, bought that building to kind of keep a lawsuit away from it.
Okay. Well, I would take at least the tentative position that they have established that as it is now, it is either not habitable or not, is otherwise unsafe. Does anybody dispute that? Okay, and then the repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of the property is not economically feasible. Okay, so we have a specific definition of economically feasible that we are required to consider. For the purposes of this section, economically feasible means that the cost of the repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of an historic landmark, when combined with the cost of the land, do not exceed the fair market value of the real property after the repair, rehabilitation, or restoration of the historic landmark has been completed. All right.
Do we have any information on those points?
Yeah, that I think is a big sticking point. The burden of persuasion is upon the applicant. This is a point we have to decide. I mean, we need estimates, quotes as to what would restore it to a habitable, safe condition.
And what the market value would be?
And what the market value of the property would be. On the fair market value, I mean, a professional appraisal or possibly determining some other method of determining it, and I looked at the documents submitted. I do not think that the applicant has actually met their burden with respect to that we don't have a recent quote for repairs. We do not have any sort of statement of what the fair market value is now or what it would be after the repair. Any indication that there's been any efforts to market the building to anyone to determine what that value would be if the repairs were done, or even what the people would be offering for it, knowing that they would have to do the repairs if they purchased it. I'm going to tentatively say that, based upon what's been submitted, that the applicant has not met that burden of showing that it's not economically feasible to repair, rehabilitate, or restore the property. Anybody wish to dispute that point? Any argument that
I
you?
agree with it.
And the property's condition did not result from damage which has been purposefully caused to the property or allowed to occur due to the gross neglect of the owner with the intention of making the restoration of the property not economically feasible. We don't have anybody presenting us evidence in favor of that. However, I do know that in past sessions, we have talked about the waterproofing and water damage edge and requested that the building owner be notified. I know especially when those bricks fell out of the wall, we had asked that they had be contacted regarding maintenance of the building. Don't know if that was done or if they took any action regarding that. There was also the fire in 2020. I'm not sure what steps they had taken to prevent that or what steps were taken to repair the building.
It still
After
has
it
its
occurred.
original boarding and tarp and everything
Right.
from the original night of the fire. So they haven't done anything with it to
Okay.
shore it up.
So I think it is questionable. I think that there's at least an open question on that point as to whether they took the necessary steps to prevent the fire or whether they took steps to repair the damages that were caused by the fire. Whether the deterioration that presently exists as a result of the failure to do those repairs or rehabilitation or to take those steps. But again, we don't have any positive evidence against that. I would say at least that I am not satisfied on that point. So as to section 2, I'd say the 3 points that we are supposed to consider are the applicant has established the first point, failed to establish the second point, and that I'm not satisfied that we have fully addressed the third point. Anybody disagree with that? I'd say we probably are not in a position to be able to approve the demolition based on section 2. 3, the owner demonstrates to the satisfaction of the Historic Commission that the denial of the demolition is inconsistent with a legitimate interest in the health, safety, and welfare of the city. Has everybody had time to review his submissions?
Yes.
Does anybody have any discussion on that point?
Not even the owner.
Anybody here have an argument that section 3 has been met? Or the demolition request is for an inappropriate addition or a portion of a structure that is not historically significant. And the demolition will not adversely affect those parts of the structure that are significant as determined by the Historic Commission. Okay. Well, it is for a demolition of the entire structure, so 4 is inapplicable. Okay. There's a lot of additional things that we consider for the hardship. However, none of them are directly relevant to the initial determination that we make upon receiving the application for demolition of a historically significant structure in a historic district. Do we have any further discussion regarding the application?
I guess I'm a little concerned. There was a reference to a discussion that the owner had with the engineer Tuttle. And he had no problem with it, but he kind of warned the guy about the Historic Commission. Now, the Montgomery Ward building and I guess the studio were all taken down for safety reasons, by the city.
Yes.
So
We cannot actually prevent that from happening. If the city decides that it's a danger to public safety, then they can essentially circumvent us.
yeah, I guess I'm sort of wondering whether that's the ultimate goal here. He didn't come here to make a plea for his building.
Then the burden of proof falls on the city to demonstrate that it doesn't meet all these requirements.
Well, they didn't come
No,
to
I
us
don't think
on
that it
Montgomery
does.
Ward or the studio. They didn't come.
I think the way it's written, the city can demolish it, but there is a burden of proof that must be met in order for them to do that.
And they owned those 2 buildings.
Yeah.
Yes.
No certificate of appropriateness shall be required if immediate action, including demolition, is necessary to remedy conditions imminently dangerous to life, health, or property as determined by the chief building official, the Division of Fire, or the Health Department. They do not have to do any of that if they make that determination. They can completely circumvent us in that condition. in that situation.
Of course, the level of proof you'd have to do, given the Snyder building has bricks falling off it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like that would have to give you some level of, you'd have to achieve before you could do that.
Yeah, I'm afraid it may be end up being a legislative remedy if you feel that they're inconsistent in what they do, though. I'm not
Okay.
sure who would have standing to sue about it. Or the building already being demolished on an emergency basis, that there would be much of a remedy that the court could give. And do we have any further discussion of the application? Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny.
I'll second it.
Request a roll call vote.
Roger Daniel,
Yes, for deny.
Jamie LaKinnis,
Yes.
Matt Dixon,
Deny.
Jim Stabler,
Yes for deny.
Andy Brickler,
Yes for deny.
Sam Cornwell.
Okay. All right. I would request that when staff notifies the applicant of the denial, that they make sure that they are aware of the appeal provisions for appeal to the Historic Commission. And make sure that they're aware of the ordinance and what that entails. All right, new and old business. Start with old business. What have we got?
As far as old business, I followed up with the majority of that with you via email. Sam, you've not been aware, but I'll forward those emails to you as well. Still been in contact with several of the buildings, Firehouse Number 2 and Carnegie Library, and trying to get an update. Currently, Firehouse Number 2 is not interested in being historically designated. They've determined that it would provide them with more steps to follow if they wanted to make any alterations to their building. And Carnegie Library has been very excited to speak to us and speak to you, but I've not heard back from them in a few weeks. That kind of covers all old business that I haven't directly addressed via email. Our new business comes from your fellow member, Jeremy.
So the D.E. Snyder building, we had, I don't remember when it was, but a couple of us have gone through some of the different buildings. And one of the ones that I've wanted to go through since I joined Historic Commission years ago was the Snyder building and the Manchester, because I were told they were getting ready to fall in at any time. And we finally went through those the other day, and I was very surprised just how stable the D.E. Snyder building is. It's basically an Armco steel building wrapped in concrete. And while, yes, some of the fascia and concrete are soft and rotting, the building itself is structurally intact. We actually had Bill Wayland, who's a developer out of Louisville, go through the Manchester, the First Financial Building, the Armco Research Center, and the D.E. Snyder building. Interestingly enough, even though I've heard the Snyder building was the worst building we had, he walked in and said, "This is the building you guys should start with because it's the easiest." This is somebody very reputable in that field. It is also my understanding that Nathan, the assistant city manager, Cahill, is working on some RFP type documentation to put out to see if we can find someone in the open market that may want to look at these buildings and rehab them. And I know of at least 3 or 4 developers who have come through that could really pull the project together. I actually reached out to, and a segue actually attached to the Snyder building is it is connected to the Manchester Hotel for its tax credits. New Ales Brewing was interested in that building. for some time, but they can never get a tour of it. We finally got them a tour of it. They were definitely still interested in it, but there's a question of how you separate those tax credits from the Manchester to give them to the Snyder Building. It can be done. It requires some work on the city's part because they own the buildings. It's not impossible, but it's not necessarily easy. That said, there's been a lot of people interested in both buildings, and the tax credits are due to run out in December on both projects, the Manchester and the Snyder Building. The owner of those tax credits is William Grau, the original guy that was going to restore both. I've heard lots of different stories about that guy and what his capacity to do the project was. I actually reached out to him to see if I could see if he's interested in kind of circling back, or what went sideways on that it was moving and then it wasn't. And I've heard lots of stories about him not having money and things like that. I reached out to Nathaniel Kalin at SHPO to talk to him about how they review. When you fill out a tax credit application, you have to put an approval for your finances. You have to prove that out. Now, I don't know if they call and verify that, or if it's like a soft pre-approval. Here's the document from a bank. It's got to be timed within a certain period. And best I can tell, he met all of those requirements. So now here we are. It's my understanding that the state may try and claw those tax credits back earlier than December 20. As of this moment, the only person who could develop that building and get the tax credits without completely going through the application process again would be William Grau. And I guess we'll have to see how the RFP process goes. But again, all the buildings that I went through, I know Andy went through them. Roger, did you go through any? No. Sam did not. And I know, Andy, you may have some input on that as well. But from my perspective, I was very surprised just how stable they were after so many years of being told that they weren't. However, Bill Whalen did point out that the Snyder Building and the Manchester both we need to start working on them in the next 12 to 24 months.
So does Grau own the tax credits in his own name?
Yes.
Or are they actually in some LLC that he could sell the
I think
papers to the LLC?
I think they're in his name. I'd have to look at the application. I should have brought it. I actually have Wes from New Ale's got a copy of it, and it's heavily redacted, but it does spell out all of his approvals and how he was doing it. And again, with tax credit projects, I think a lot of people don't understand is you don't start working on them until you have your tax credits, or you lose the tax credits on the work. And I know there was a lot of push, he needs to work, but without the tax credits, why would you do anything to the building? And that's the same place the Carnegie is sitting in. When we screwed around with the Oakland Historic District stuff by calling it off and pulling the research center out, that triggered us having to reapply for National Register status with new boundaries and borders, which we talked about at our last meeting. We approved some borders, and then the city submitted some different borders, and there was a whole combobulation about that. I know I've talked to you about it. But we're kind of in a weird spot with both of those buildings. I don't know if that's a situation where I was advised from my contact at SHPO that it might be better for us to RFP it and go back through the tax credit process with a new developer. I've asked different people, different opinions on William Grau, because he technically could pick the project back up. If the city were willing, he could pick the project back up tomorrow and start back using the tax credits.
He never did have any financial backing.
You can't get the tax credits without it. So he had to have someone wrote a letter from a bank that said he had $31 million in financing. So I've heard that same exact thing, but again, you can't get the tax credits approved without that approval letter from a bank. So either the letter was forged or it wasn't concrete enough. at some point, he had the ability to receive an approval letter from a financial institution that he's good for the money. So, I don't know if, Andy, you want to add anything?
No, I'd say, I kind of think, you've done a lot of research on this, Jeremy, and we kind of went to these buildings, and, the one thing I think it was interesting when, I won't say staff, but staff, told us at many council meetings, I think we had that working session with council that one time, and we were told that the buildings, you would have to have hazmat suits on, and the buildings were just really bad shape. I'm happy to share that that was not the case. Yeah, there's mold in there, there's black mold, the roofs are leaking, but overall, like Jeremy said, they're built, it shocked me how well they are built, and it's just facade. So I agree with what you said, Jeremy. I think it's time for the city to either really push a project forward on this and truly support the effort of restoration of these properties, or we really got to relook at what are we blatantly, for me, what am I doing here on a Thursday night trying to drive historical preservation in this town?
Yeah. I agree with that. So that was the tour outcome. I talked to Nathaniel right before he went on vacation, and I think we were supposed to see some RFP type paperwork. Do you know anything about it?
I do not.
So we were supposed to see some RFP paperwork. Haven't seen it yet, but I did have a conversation with him that he was working on it. So I'm hopeful that once we see that and we get some activity, that will give us a little more guidance and hope on what to do with these buildings.
And I'll throw out there one little thing in, Jeremy. I know me and you've been kind of doing some grassroots efforts of trying to reach out to people on just, hey, what options are out there, in the private sector. So I think I think it's good if anybody on this commission knows people, reach out. Just have those conversations, and I will say that council and the city staff have been really supportive of getting people through those buildings to look at them, even if it's just to look at them before they put the RFP in, because I think that people are gonna have a lot of questions on how the shape of those buildings is. So that's my recommendation.
Okay. I know in the past you had indicated that, someone had indicated that Faith Church was interested in becoming part of a historic district.
Is that the one on?
It is immediately behind Central Donuts and
Yes.
Central Ave. And
Uh, Pastor Michael Bailey came in when we first started these, literally day one when we started the CLG process, or right as we were certified. They came in as one of the first people. They wanted to have their building turned into a landmark. And I've had further discussions with him since then. They're still interested in that, but they don't know the exact process. And we kind of told them to hold off because the Oakland district, I think initially sort of either included that building or butted up to it, but the new district lines that have been submitted to the state have retracted that. So I don't know exactly what that is, but I will reach out to him and have him maybe come to our next meeting.
Didn't he appear?
He did. They came in, they literally were one of the first people that came in and said, hey, we want to do this and I'm not sure what advantage for a church being a landmark would be. I don't know if that opens them up to grants or.
I thought he wanted to be part of the district.
They wanted
That's
it.
what he was asking for.
Yeah, they wanted to be a landmark. They wanted to see if there's something that they could take advantage of that would help them in their restoration efforts. Because I think at this point, last I talked to them, they did have title to the property. They've paid off all their mortgages, and they wanted to do some restoration of the building. They've got a historic bell that they only ring on very special occasions because it does have some work that needs, I think it's cracked or something.
I know a famous one like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking that rather than the Oakland, it is immediately adjacent to the Central Avenue
I agree.
district, which is to say that the building that houses the Chamber of Commerce now goes all the way up to the street that the church is main interest.
The Chamber of Commerce building isn't part of the historic district. It just stops at Clark.
It stops at Clark. Okay.
Because all those buildings should be included.
I agree.
I mean, and
We couldn't get that through the state when we did that originally.
But we don't have to now because we can add it.
Right. We couldn't get the city to do the CLG at that time.
Correct, and now we are, it's in our hands, that we can, and it is well known that historic districts were drawn too short, too narrow for a number of different reasons. And that's evident in our districts, even in the Highlands, it's a little small, for what it really should be, just like South Main should at least go down to Barnett Stadium, and it should go a little bit in each direction to sort of give it some protection, as a district. And unfortunately, when you look at the values of districts from the 70s and 80s, their values aren't competitive with the later additions that were drawn wider and larger in footprint. And, South Main's a good example of that. We have a lot of houses that it doesn't make any sense why the district stopped where it stopped. So I'm all for re-examining those boundaries and looking into how and what we should do and how those should be protected or expanded, or because I know we have the ability to expand the local district, and then if we want to send that to the National Register, us being a CLG gives us a lot better chances of changing our National Register, and it's always easier to modify a district than it is to create a new one. So we kind of have precedents to do any of the districts.
Would that be something that would be interested in doing, looking at contacting the property owners, or is to push the boundaries of that district out a bit further?
I like the idea of it. I think, is there an opportunity for us to, I think the historic districts, some people get nervous by getting added to them, and they don't understand what the real purpose and mission statement of a district is. So that may be something, some type of infograph or something we can put out as staff would reach out to them to kind of inform them of the good and the bad, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to reach someone that is eager for it.
Yep.
So that we could get some voluntary people to come into a district and then be able to show the ones that were elected.
I think
Benefit from it.
I think maybe by our next meeting, we should, even if we don't have James, can we meet without an application? Like, can we say?
I think that would be considered a special session, but I believe we could still do that.
Okay, well, what I was gonna say is maybe we could all put together some ideas of what we think they should be, and at our next meeting, if anyone has a Highlands thing or a South Main thing, maybe we could discuss it at the next meeting and then take that out into the community and knock some doors and see if there's any support for such a thing. Because I personally have had an interest in a Martin Luther King historic district just south of South Main. So, I mean, there's a lot of history down in that area that would be pretty significant.
I'm kind of wondering how many of those buildings, past Betsy's, are rentals.
I think
Which makes it harder, of course.
I think most of those are owner occupied.
Are they really?
Yeah. I don't think there's any of those that are rentals. Maybe one or two next to the funeral home, but all those are owner occupied and well kept right now. Like, this is the time. And I have asked people that live in that area, is that something that interests you? And I have generally gotten a positive response. But I would be willing to knock all the doors and ask that question. But I want to know, I would like us to come up with, we think it should go here, and we think it should go there, and just sort of have a rough idea of what we're looking at.
Well, I think, do we want to kind of target one area first? Or you want to try to go, because I mean, it could get crazy, right?
I'm kind of the mindset,
At least initially, that we should contact each of the possibilities and see who is interested.
I like to get while the getting's good. And if right now we are in a situation where we have an open ear with the next layer up, which is council and staff, and we have, if we have the support we need from staff, and we have the support here, and we have the support on council, this would be the time to take our shot at looking at if this is a time where we could do this. Because I feel like we've missed a lot of opportunities real estate wise and demolition wise that we would have not missed had we spent more time drawing our districts out a little better.
Agreed.
And I think there's confusion generally with where South Main District is. Some people thinks it goes down Main or down Yankee, and it only goes down Yankee on one side, but not the east side. And we look, I know me and Matt looked at that, and Roger, you were here, and Jim, you were here, where we looked at it, and the legal description basically doesn't count that, but it's drawn in on one of our little booklets or something.
The historic preservation plan.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of due anyways to revisit the legal description of the districts and to make sure that, and get some guidance maybe from Barb Powers, from SHPO, to see if maybe she has some ideas of what we should do. And it might be something that we find a professional that specializes in that sort of thing to get some guidance as to, yeah, go here, but not there, and here's why. The city of Dayton made it really easy. They just said the whole thing's a historic district. Easy.
And then just the other thing, since I've been on historic commission, we did add 500 the Alameda to the Highlands. So for staff, that meeting, if you guys are trying to look how that process worked, we did it at that point with the previous staff liaison.
And I know Jackie Phillips, we had to add the lot next to her
Oh yeah, we did do that one. I forgot.
on to the district. There was a process there because she was wanting to do an addition on her property.
Yep.
And I know that there was some cycles there, and staff helped with that. So, I mean, I think this is the opportunity for us to start looking at some of that stuff.
Okay.
If I could just add one thing. As we previously mentioned at our last meeting, and then via the emails that I've been sending out to you guys, our next process is starting the historic preservation plan, revamping that. I think that once staff starts talking to them and understanding what they're going to do, and I think that there could be a lot of overlap. So having them go out there, take the pictures, kind of understanding what are some of the historically significant buildings that needed to be added on to the Highlands or the South Main or the Central, and following up from that.
Who's doing that?
That's still up for contract.
Okay.
There's conversation right now with the company who led the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm going to have any responsibility or ownership in this, but
I feel like they spoke favorably about our historic districts. And I feel like coming from Marymount, I felt like, you know, they know. If anybody knows, they know.
Enforcement, do we have any code inspections going on, or anything that we know about maintenance, repairs, and anything that's happening in the district?
as of now, not currently, I've asked code enforcement to start passing along information to me. We've had several fence permits or fences that were installed previously, several years ago, that are too tall in, I believe, the Oakland. But that's generally where most of our issues are.
So who is backfilling Annette's role for code enforcement? Because she was the one who kind of went out there all the time and kept up with who's putting what in, and brought them and made sure she made that contact, like, hey, you need to come in here. Because we initially had a ton of Oakland applications, and I feel like a lot of those we were making significant difference in how that neighborhood was going to look. And I'm afraid that we've not had those in a long time.
Currently, Annette's position was split between the remaining 4 code enforcement officers. And unfortunately, we have one on leave, I guess. She was injured on duty, so now we went from 5 to 3.
Is that something that the city would consider a volunteer fill-in? I know.
That is a great question. That's something I can look into. I do know that they've been actively interviewing for the last several months, trying to fill that position. They were trying to fill it before she left, and they've yet to find the right fit.
So is it, if I remember right, and I could be misspoken here, but when they split this up after Annette left, they put it into quadrants, not necessarily that there's somebody over historic district, it's
Right.
a quadrant of the city that they were over. So that is a true.
That's true, yeah.
So is there an opportunity to get that information to us, and so we can share that, hey, this person is our code enforcement for this region of the city? Because there are things that I know in the Highlands, for example, that we've submitted as violations, and there is no action being taken on it. And I know South Main probably is the same way. So maybe we can build that relationship with that code enforcement person and kind of maybe have a partnership with the historic districts themselves with them. Anybody got proposal against that? Is that?
No, I think that's good.
And I think it has been kind of worrisome that basically it's been a very long time since we've had any sort of enforcement that's been brought to us. Yes, and I know that there are people out there that are not maintaining, not repairing, not preserving.
Do you guys want to put a walkthrough on the books? I know we keep talking about it, but I think we're kind of way past our inspection period for the districts.
We want to do it when it is
I'd rather,
extremely hot.
I think we need to do it when it's bitterly cold out.
do that again. Last time we did it, it was 19 degrees and blowing snow. It was very
So
cold.
this time we should do it when there's a heat index of 112.
Andy, real quick to answer your question, I can send you the quadrant map of code enforcement.
Okay.
It won't be accurate to date at this current time because Annette is gone.
Yep.
So the fifth person's gone, and then the fourth person is currently on medical leave.
I didn't, you don't have to send it right away. I know, I'm just looking at like, hey, if it's this person over here has got the Highlands, and they've got, I can start, as the president of the Highlands, I can start working with them and build that relationship. South Main can do with the same person there. Instead of having to like always come to you, maybe then there's an opportunity for them to come and give us a report of what they're working on that impact the historical districts.
Absolutely. I can send you that map tomorrow.
No rush, man. That's good.
All right, so I think that the only other new business that we have is that we should welcome our new member on board.
Sam
All right.
Cornwell.
Yeah, if you'd like to tell us a bit about yourself or.
My name is Sam Cornwall. I'm Middletonian, born and raised, and married my high school sweetheart. I have 3 children. I am a banker by trade. I've been in that line of work all my adult life. And I've gotten to know a couple gentlemen in here. I know I've talked to Mr. Brickler. As far as my historical background, I will tell you that it's still forthcoming. But I did live in the Highlands, and I will tell you that I do have a high level of respect of what needs to be done. I do think that it should be preserved. I've had some conversations with Jeremy a little bit about some of that, and I think we need more people that are interested in preserving the area. So, in talking today about the location over on Main Street, that was very intriguing to me. I was sitting here thinking, why would we knock that down? We're gonna leave it as an empty lot. I mean, that's, to me, that's not an option. So I can definitely see myself being extremely interested in being here. So I appreciate you two being on the planning commission with me, inviting me to be here. I will tell you that my heart's here, and I think we need more people volunteering that their heart's here to be able to do things for the city. So I think the end result is that, doing the right thing for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We really appreciate you coming on board. Okay, any other new business from anyone?
I think I'd like to mention that, Joe Mulligan has, been in a lot of these meetings and different commissions and everything else. And of course, Larry was mayor for a long time, and their father passed away on Monday. And I didn't know if everybody knew it. I know a lot of us knew it, but just wanted to mention that. That's all.
Our condolences to the Mulligan family.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, this meeting of the Middletown City Historic Commission is adjourned.
Thanks, Matt.
Adjourned.